This third and final PowerPoint presentation for LP1, and it covers Chapter 4. When Jeff talked about the failure of the vet business, and I asked him why, I was really trying to direct the conversation toward 4 strategies that we talked about in the previous lecture that one might have for an internet presence, and also to have an idea that you can articulate on what is it that I want this thing to look like, what is it that I want it to accomplish, what's my vision, what's my mission statement, who's my target audience, what's the intended market space. In other words, how's this changing, if at all, my position within the marketplace. That could have had a lot of weight actually for the vet business, depending on, again, what they wanted to accomplish. They should have done a SWOT analysis to say what are the strengths and weaknesses for us going forward with a presence such as the web, or as a tool to augment or leverage existing strengths that we have or weaknesses that we have in place. Is this solving some of our weaknesses? Is it creating new ones, etc., etc.? And those things can happen with a web presence. How are we going to market this thing? What's our development timeline? And then we talked about budgeting. How much am I willing to spend on this as a component of my overall operation? And again, how much revenues, if it's intended to produce revenue, how much revenue can I expect? And against that, I weigh whether it's producing revenue or not. How much money is it going to cost me to operate this thing? These is a good outline from your text on the various elements that your web presence can have. It can have part of these, some of these, all of these. There's the website itself, a social media presence, the use of email either as a promotional tool and or as simply a communication tool, and then how does it jibe or interface with our offline media, our print, TV, radio, whatever. That's an important thing to talk about and discuss. I'll just tell you real quickly as an example, if you're using your web as a sales transaction and you're trying to push people to your site from offline media such as print or TV or ad, you may well want to have, you always want to know what is the efficacy of these various marketing promotions that I'm utilizing. Which ones are effective, which ones aren't. One of the things that you can do is have, let's say you have 3 different media that you want to test the efficiency or efficacy. You might have 3 different phone numbers, one for each one. Well, you might have 3 different web addresses that all lead you to the same site, but you can track which media is producing the greatest amount of traffic. There's other ways to do it than that too, but again, the questions you want to be able to ask and answer. So again, it's what is this thing intended to do? Why am I building what I'm building, and what do I want it to accomplish, and what features are needed to accomplish those various objectives? What kind of additional hardware and telecommunications do I need? How's it going to affect my budget? What new expertise do I need, if any, in this new formula for how I'm going to run my company? Do I need a technology person? How's it going to affect my inventory control? Am I going to be 24/7? So on and so forth. Most small businesses just jump right into it, and they don't answer those questions, and then the web presence itself can become a bit of a nightmare if you didn't plan on how it would change people's jobs descriptions and required expertise, and the time that they are already committing to their regular jobs. I like this particular slide from the text because what it says to me is it would behoove you to sit down and write your business objectives out. What functions do you need in your system to realize those objectives? And then what's the fallout from what are the fallout needs from that? It goes, how does it change, for example, the functionality of a particular individual? One of the things I went through when I built a website in the early 90s to deal with foreclosures in Hawaii was how much of the work will be done in-house, and that was an easy one, quite honestly, because I didn't know anything at the time about web design, and all these companies that exist now that do it for you weren't available options. So I hired a firm in Bellevue to do it. They did a good job. One of the other things that was key in the site was when I would put in new information, would I give the information for them to effect the uploads of that information, or could I have them design the site such that I could do it myself? And I thought that in the beginning it would be best if I did it myself, and that's how I had them design it, and it made it cheaper and it made the maintenance cheaper. And then I always assumed that if volume got large enough and I couldn't handle it internally, then I could renegotiate with them to do it. So those are the kinds of things you want to think about of how am I going to handle the functionality of the requirements that are affected by creating this web presence to begin with. This is just another version, a matrix of exactly what I was just talking about, a different version. I'm going to skip the slide on Weebly. If you want to sell on the web, which most businesses do, they see it as a way of additional revenues. Again, I would think for most businesses, small businesses at least, it's not a good sales revenue unless it generates enough new sales to cover the costs associated with having a web presence, which can be substantial. But if you're going to do sales, you need these features like an online catalog, shopping cart, credit card processing to be up to date. And again, those things can be considerably expensive. There are myriad software packages out there that allow a firm to perform a lot of different functions. You want to consider again your needs versus the functionality of the particular package that you're looking at. And again, this issue of cost, is it making you more efficient or is it making you less efficient? How would it make you less efficient? Because you're simply structurally and organizationally can't handle what it is you're putting in place. I talked previously about, I think, about IBM's model where for small firms, they can perform a lot of different functions with their software and their staff, like training, uh, advise you of upgrades. You rent what you need, so the scalability is better. You can grow into their full array of our menu of services. You don't have to buy them all and then have, like you would for, let's say, PowerPoint or even Excel, a lot of things that are irrelevant to what you do. There are a lot of firms, again, like IBM, that you only need to rent what you need, and you can rent more as your company grows. I'd encourage you to watch the video on the matter. We just talked about what scalability is. You can scale uh, hardware in two directions: vertically, increase your processing power, or horizontally, or improve your overall architecture by the use of uh, clouding, that sort of thing. One of your assignments is about your third discussion thread was about websites that that particularly appeal to you. These are great. This is a great. This one and the next one are great tables from your text around features that annoy people, and then things that people like to see in a particular site. And these showed up actually in many of your comments and your discussion threads. And finally, I learned my lesson on this one. You want to test your site for functionality before you ever go public with it. I remember doing a survey in the late 1990s with Oregon State, and the web was just taken off as a venue through which you could do surveys. So it was an academic survey, and I didn't test it on the web before I sent it out. I really had it laid out conceptually really well, but I didn't test the links between the various questions and how the information was tabulated ultimately well enough, and it just turned into a complete mess. So you want to make sure that everything works properly, that you beta test it with people that will point out mistakes, and it's sort of a no harm, no foul situation in their use. Microsoft does that all the time with its new versions of Microsoft Office. They often or regularly use universities as their beta test, give them the new upgrades, and then spend a year or two working out the bugs before they take it to market.